Hello, and welcome to the War Room. This is day 44 of Russia's incursion into the Ukraine. It's been a long day. We have started a little bit late, and it appears to me that I'm flying solo tonight. So, as a favor to you, we might actually get through this pretty quickly. I don't remember telling everybody I was doing this tonight. Yesterday was sort of an impromptu, I couldn't make it. So, bear with me. I was running a little bit behind, and my allergies are killing me today. Because I live in South Texas. So, anyway. Like I said before, welcome to the War Room. Today is day 44 of the Russian incursion into Ukraine. And this morning I had done the show prep early, the first half of the show prep, which is about the first half of the day over in Ukraine. And there were more stories in that segment than there was the entire day yesterday. I have sent out private messages to my other co-hosts, just in case they couldn't see the room, because I changed the permissions of the room. Mainly because I had set it up in such a way where people could see it so they could jump in case they wanted to join. But the problem is they would jump in without knowing what the hell was going on. So then I ended up with people who didn't actually want to do the show. So I reverted it back to the way it was, and they never saw me go into what I call the green room. So anyway, let me go ahead and just say good evening to Shady Hill, Terry Scher, and the Polish Hammer, apparently, who's actually out in the chat but not in the panel, which is fine. And he says that the Russian military is outright brutal and savage in how they treat the Ukrainian people. Yes, you are correct. However, I would argue that war has a two-part effect. What it does is it shows the rest of the world what a human being is capable of doing in terms of helping their fellow human being or the brutality of what they will do to another human being. Which is why I always have this saying that nothing resets the world's priorities faster than a world war. Just think about that. Let me repeat it. Nothing resets humanity's priorities faster than a world war. Now, you can take that any way you want, but the saying itself is 100% accurate. Whether it's resets humanitarian efforts, resets geopolitical efforts, resets geoeconomic norms, or just illustrating the brutality of what one human being is willing to do to another. Either way, nothing resets it faster. We are in a moment in history right now where I'm not the, what would you call this? I am not the target demographic anymore. And it's hard for me to admit that. In a couple of days, I'll be 43 years old. Anything and everything that has to do with the world around me is being forged and guided by my generation, but it's not targeting my generation. It's targeting the next generation to either inform or worry or educate or coerce or corrupt the next generation. That's the truth of it. My generation is either the progenitor or the influencer or the I can't say the destructor of this generation because the man that's currently causing what's going on is 69 years old. That's not my generation. He's the generation 2 or 3 ahead of mine. Either way, you're seeing brutality on a scale that's very hard for most people to comprehend, especially being the children of the generation that I would have created. People my age would have had children. Those children are now, let's say, somewhere between 7 to 25 years old, right? Most of those people between those age groups have no clue what's going on right now in terms of the gravity of the situation. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't outliers. I'm not saying that there aren't people ahead of the curve that are older and wiser for their years. That's not the case at all because I was that way. I was way older and wiser than my years when I was in my 20s, which is why I didn't get along with anybody my age back then. All I'm saying is there is a culture shock going on right now to the degree that people are scratching their heads going, how could anybody do this? And they're asking that question, which are a generation or two behind me, younger than me. But then there are people a generation or two older than me nodding their head and going, you just don't know, my sweet summer child. This is just the way it is. So Warsaw is asking, is there no honor of human decency that the Russians even have? The answer to that I actually posed 2 days ago. Um, you have leadership in the Russian military that are old school, Old Testament even, and they are being led or coerced or threatened by a generation that grew up during the Cold War. They are KGB, they are FSB, they are Stasi. They may even be post post neo-Nazi. So post original Nazi becoming neo-Nazi. You can take that for what you will. I'm not a big practitioner of what you would call uh, offender of breaking Godwin's law. And for those of you who don't know what that is, Godwin's law is a saying that in any modern context, if anybody in a debate or argument brings up Adolf Hitler or Nazi Germany, that discussion is over. It's just over. The problem with that is everything leading up to this war, that law applies to. Unfortunately, this conflict puts a smack dab right back into Godwin's law because Vladimir Putin is a modern day neoliberal, far leftist liberal, whether you want to admit it or not. Page 1 of the Democratic National Committee's playbook here in the United States is very simple. Preemptively accuse the other side of which you are guilty of yourself to set the narrative. And what Putin and his army are doing, or his leadership to that army are doing, is they're accusing the Ukraine, a sovereign nation, of hosting neo-Nazis and committing genocide. But they are the ones who have invaded this country, and they are the ones who have committed wholesale genocide all across the country of Ukraine. There are photos. I have shown them to you. We have described these things in the last 44 days. Granted, I missed 12 days because of no internet, and yesterday I missed a day because I had to do the maintenance. I had a problem at home and I had to fix it, so I couldn't do the show. That problem has been resolved. But what I can tell you is that the Russian military and the Russian leadership, and Vladimir Putin specifically, is trying to say that there are Nazis in a country that is a sovereign nation who is led by a Jew. And yet, he says that they're neo-Nazis. First oxymoron. He says he needs to liberate the people of the Donbass region in Donetsk and Luhansk. They are now cities in ruin. It's almost like that old 4chan meme from back in the day that said, "We're gonna free the shit out of you," and it was a picture of bombs. It makes no sense. He is accusing the country that he is attacking of the very thing that he is. He has invaded a sovereign nation. He is exterminating wholesale another people. And on top of that, he sucks at it. He is inept. He is neutered. He is inexperienced. He is ignorant, uneducated in the conflict or concept of war. He's a fucking moron. He's a sawed-off little runt. He is the Bohemian Corporal, the very thing that people jokingly made fun of Adolf Hitler for. He will be remembered in history as a fucking joke. And what's really ironic is he can't do it alone. He had to hire Syrians. He had to hire Mongolians. He had to hire Belarusians. He had to hire Chechens. He couldn't even do it himself. How pathetic is that? It's pathetic. It's a travesty. It's a joke. Unfortunately, it's not a very funny joke because people have died. Lots of them. Had this conflict ended in 48 to 72 hours, and somehow he failed, and he had retreated back to Moscow, the world may have overlooked this. But this has been going on for 44 days. The death toll is in the tens of thousands, and strangely enough, it's mostly his own people, soldiers. He has laid waste to cities that had generational history in the hundreds, if not thousands, of years. He has erased history to try to rewrite his own. For what? His army is made up of people who were not even born in the Cold War. He has conscripts in the hundreds of thousands now, as you'll find out later with the stories I have to share with you today. There's no communism anymore. There's no socialism anymore. These are people who were born in Russia with Starbucks, with McDonald's, with the Apple iPod, an iPhone, an iWatch. They have Netflix. They have Amazon Prime. They have gotten to taste they've gotten to drink the Kool-Aid of capitalism. They rather like it. And yet this asshole, this derelict, this fossilized fucking commie dinosaur who can't even get hair plugs or keep a marriage together. He's the end of the line when it comes to socialism in Russia. He is the reminder of why you shouldn't do it. He's trying to bring back something nobody's asking for. And he's made himself look like a fool in the process. Once upon a time, the Communist Chinese Party looked at Russia as they will carry us into a new world order where we run the show. And after the first 6 days of this conflict, China has shut the fuck up. They have PR'd their way into saying we support them. But they are shitting their pants right now. They cannot believe how neutered and weak and pathetic the Russian military is. They are an army of conscripts, of children with no experience, being beaten, whipped, and threatened with death by Cold War relics. It's pathetic. My dad, he's 86 years old. He was born in the Great Depression. His his half brother served in World War II. He fought. He served the 456 bomb group. My dad was too young for that. He didn't get involved until Korea and Vietnam, and he just got out just short of 1980. Think of the combat history between the years 1960 to 1981. That's where my dad was. He looks at this and he just can't understand what's going on. He doesn't get it. Nobody does. Anyway, um, I've got a few stories for you. I am by myself tonight, so I will ask you to tolerate and put up with me. Um, to answer your question, Warsaw, Putin has had one wife, and I believe they were divorced in the early 2000s, maybe up to 2013. Sorry, I kind of forget this right now. He has a he has a he has a plaything, and I believe she lives in Paris now. But he has two daughters. Both of them have been recently sanctioned by NATO or the EU or the UN. Sorry, one of those. Uh, Strangely enough, one looks almost like a young Morgan Fairchild. Just, I'm a very observant person. You have to remember, my background is psychology and sociology, so I tend to look at these things and profile these things and pay attention to these things. And she actually looks like a young Morgan Fairchild. She's not unpleasant to look at. And his other daughter, she's not terrible either. But if you look at what they're involved in, one is in the medical industry and one of them is in some sort of geopolitical thing. Uh, they're they're definitely, children of him. They're seeds of him. Nobody's ever interviewed them. Nobody's ever asked them what they think is going on right now. Either way, I have updated the scroller at the bottom, as you can see. The changes were subtle between 42 and 44. Yesterday there was a very slow news day, and I did leave a YouTube quote note. It's a new feature that they have that that Russia was kicked out of the UN Security Council because, in all honesty, what they're doing and the fact that they even had a seat at that table is a travesty and an insult to the whole process. So they're out. But not to be over or to be one upped, Russia literally pulled a, "You can't fire me because I quit." Even though they voted to kick them out, Russia was like, you can't kick us out. We quit." How pathetic. Anyway, so let me get you caught up. The reason there wasn't a show yesterday, my my car has been bizarre. Uh, Fast or rewind about, let's see, this is April. Rewind 14 months ago, we had this deep freeze in Texas, and I had to use my car as basically a heater and a generator for a few days. And I had to drive 20 miles to go get fuel for my generator, and in the process, my thermostat housing, which, if you know anything about Ford Jaguar V8s, has a very complicated intake and coolant system. It exploded. And I towed it home and I ordered the parts and I fixed it back in like March of last year. Put it all back together. Everything seemed okay. A couple weeks back, it started pissing water again, Wasn't sure what was causing it. Didn't think much of it. Thought I might have overfilled the system, whatever. And it decided that it wanted to start overheating yesterday on the way home from work. And I got kind of worried because it's a very expensive engine. And I'm familiar with how it works and I can fix it. But if I can avoid fixing it by not breaking it, I would prefer not to do that. So I stopped everything I was doing yesterday and I focused on that. And I'm happy to say that I nipped it in the bud and the car is running fine. So I had to do that. It took up my whole afternoon just to make sure that I didn't wreck a $20,000 engine. That's the positives. Negatives is, sorry, I missed the show yesterday. But thankfully, there wasn't really that many stories. Because this morning, when I was doing the show prep for the first half of the day, that number of stories was way more than the whole entirety of yesterday's stories. So you didn't miss much. But, like I said, I've updated the scrollers. Everything's good. Uh, that last statistic, mobile SRBMs, that was a new statistic that I added a few days ago. And those are short-range ballistic missile launchers. Russia has brought them into the country, into the theater. So that is the thing. Anyway, we are 21 minutes in. Let me go ahead and get you to the news, and then I will let you go. I think we have a pretty quick and dirty show for you tonight because I'm by myself, so I don't have to worry about the opinions or questions of other people in the panel. Uh, I can tell you that my tradesman, Scott, he told me earlier he was on call, so he's probably working on things when he's not supposed to be working today, so he's probably not happy about that. One other piece of news is my birthday's coming up in 5 days? 5 days. Pwnery will be 43 years old. So, because I don't ask people for things, and I don't believe that I just get freebies unless I earned it, I decided to buy myself a birthday present a couple days ago. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I will show you when it gets here. But I can tell you that my $850 birthday present turned into a $1,400 ordeal because I had bought accessories and all this other stuff for it. Strangely enough, the ammo showed up for it today, before anything else. So, in terms of future videos, updates, yeah, my birthday present is on the way. It should be here Tuesday. I will do a full video of it and the creature comfort add-ons for it, and you'll get to see that. But that's kind of what I did. I spent some money. A lot of people are scratching their heads going, but you're broke. How did you come up with the money? I spent some money. That's all you have to know. I also bought the parts to fix my other car. That's kind of cool. And that's about it, really. Puppies are cool. I had 4 puppies back in January. I still have 3 left in my possession. I did give one to a friend. I have 3 left. I have at least decided to keep 2 of the remaining 3. But if somebody wanted the 3rd one, I could be persuaded to adopt it out to you. So if you're in the Houston, Texas area or nearby, or within a reasonable driving distance, and you like Yorkshire Terriers, I have one. Male. He is he is 3 months and 5 days old today. So let's go ahead and get to the getting, shall we? Because, you guys have been so patient with me going through my long-winded intros. My first story comes out from yesterday, because we missed yesterday, and it was 10 minutes to midnight, so it's technically day 43's news, but it was important, and here's the photo for you. This was at 11:50 p.m. my time, Central Standard Time. If I wanted to go with EST, then yeah, it would have been day 44. It would have been 12:50 a.m. But I do things with my time zone. The United States is increasing the number of Ukrainian refugees allowed into the country as larger numbers of those fleeing the war-torn country are now trying to relocate into the U.S. by coming through the southern border. That should make you quirk an eyebrow, first of all, because if any of you are familiar with the news in the United States, just in case there's some of you watching are from other countries, we have this thing called Title 42, and it's about to expire in May or June May or June. And the problem with that is that was like ringing the dinner bell for illegal immigrants. And now they're anticipating 2 million more flooding the country. Now, being the son of an immigrant that got here the right way, I have a very particular interest in this because this pisses me off. But that's a different subject for a different day. For the fact that Ukrainian refugees are being flown to Mexico and then coming across the border, I'm strangely not that bothered by it. But anyway, Vlad Fedorishin, a volunteer with access to a waiting list, said yesterday, that the U.S. processed 620 Ukrainians in the last 24 hours, while about 800 others have been arriving daily in Tijuana. That's Mexico. Volunteers say the U.S. was previously admitting a few hundred Ukrainians daily. CBP didn't provide numbers in response to questions about operations and plans over the last 2 days, saying only that it had expanded facilities in San Diego to deal with humanitarian cases. That is actually a photo of an intake center in Tijuana, which you're seeing right there. Why couldn't we just airlift them straight from Ukraine to here? I don't know. Let's move on. So about an hour later, now it is day 44 for me, 12:51 a.m. I haven't been to bed yet. It is 7:51 a.m. Ukrainian time, dawn, sunrise. Russian forces have fully withdrawn from Ukraine's north to both Russia and Belarus, and some troops will be sent east to Donbass. This came from the UK Defense Ministry. Here's a photo for you. This was an update posted today. Many of these forces will require significant replenishment before being ready to deploy further east, with any mass redeployment from the north likely to take place at least in a week minimum. Russia has acknowledged significant losses to its ranks, and the update continued that the Russian shelling of cities in the east and south continues as forces have advanced further south from the strategically important city of Izium, which remains under their control. Now, for those of you who've been paying attention here on this show for the last couple of days, or at least for the last couple of releases, because I hadn't been able to do it every day like I had planned. We have been saying here with my panelists for the longest time that what they were doing in the north was Plan A. Plan A failed spectacularly. They thought if they took the head off and took the capital, that the rest of the country would collapse. They never got it. They took so many losses, their supply chain was a complete failure, that they gave up. And then we were talking about what are they doing right now? And I specifically said that this was what I called an end around. They had tactically retreated back to the north. They went back into Belarus. They went back into northwestern Russia. Southwestern Russia. It would have been the northeastern flank of Ukraine. And they had to resupply. New bullets, new beans, new bandages, new BMP-21s. They had to essentially lick their wounds, count their losses, and figure things out. And what they had figured out was going north was suicidal. So they're going to focus on their original intended goal, which was to hook all the way around, back across Russia, back down south, come back into the Donbass region, and continue pushing that southern land bridge campaign. And you have seen me post pictures of the battle maps, so you know what I'm talking about. It had to do with Zaporizhzhia. It had to do with Luhansk, Donetsk. It had to push across to the Crimea to make a nice wide path from Russia to Crimea that could be unimpeded. And then that group would push further east until they had knocked out Odessa, which is the last seaport held by Ukraine. And if they do that, then they will come to the negotiating table and say, "Okay, we're done. We're just going to keep what we took, and Ukraine can just stay up there," effectively making Ukraine a landlocked country. By doing that, they dictate policy because they control all the seaport imports to their country. And they get to inspect all the sea exports from Ukraine. This is a very clever plan to keep Ukraine healed, essentially, to the whims of Moscow. That's why keeping Odessa is so critical right now. You're going to hear cliches before this and after this. This war goes far beyond Russia attacking Ukraine. What this is fascism and socialism attacking democracy. There's some truth to that. If you think about what's going to happen, let me put this into a context that most American listeners will understand. And I know that it sounds weird me saying that, but truth be told, I have viewers and listeners from other countries, so I have to say that like this. It's not because I'm trying to single you out or anything. Imagine if England, Great Britain, imagine if they were so angry by what happened in the American Revolution and the adoption of the Constitution of the United States in 1791 with its Bill of Rights. Imagine if they were so upset by that, this far ahead into the future, that they decided, you know what, enough. We're reclaiming our colony. Imagine if they started attacking us. Okay? And I know it sounds impossible, but just bear with me. Most of Canada still recognizes the authority of the crown. Quebec being the outlier because it's French Quebec. But let's just say that England were supposedly negotiating a deal. Okay? So imagine that Canada is Russia and Belarus, and Quebec is Chechnya. And they get Chechnya to fall in line with this idea. So all of Canada is under British control. And then imagine if England and its once world famous navy were to lay siege to the entire U.S. East Coast, to the point that every East Coast state from Maine to Florida was under British control again. Okay? And then imagine if they did an end around and they took Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and my state, Texas. And they had a gentleman's agreement with Mexico. A non-aggression pact, you could call it. Sound familiar? So now they control the entire eastern seaboard and all the Gulf of Mexico. Anything coming from the east to this country is cut off. Okay? Now imagine that there was no Pacific Ocean. Now, I know that's a stretch, but imagine if there was no Pacific Ocean, right? There's nothing going that direction because the Russians have a blockade of the Pacific, for instance. We are now, the United States, a landlocked country. Mexico's not sympathetic to our needs. They're not dealing with us. Canada is under the control of the Crown. Quebec was under control of the Crown because it's essentially Chechnya, right? And they control the entire eastern seaboard and all of the Gulf of Mexico. What do you think oil prices would look like, first of all? Because I live in the city that produces the most oil into gasoline. I am the refinery capital of the United States. No imports come in, no exports go out. Everything has to be done through the approval of Great Britain. That's what's going on in the Ukraine right now. If they take Odessa, Ukraine becomes a landlocked country. Everything that they need has to be done through the approval of the Soviet Union. I'm sorry, Russia. Because Poland can't help them. They got Belarus on their northern border. Moldova can't help them because they're the poorest country in the region. Russia has already gone in to Moldova, dropped 9,000 troops before this whole thing kicked off, and told Moldova, look, you're going to let us do this or else. And Moldova, being a poor country, said, whatever, just don't break our fucking China, okay? We're already poor enough as it is, we can't replace the dishes. It's not as an insult. I have to reiterate that. I don't ever use that analogy to insult Moldova, okay? They're just a country in a very tight spot, and they can't say no. That's the only thing. They can't say no. Because as soon as Russia stepped into Ukraine from Moldova, and those 9,000 troops pushed across, Moldova instantly said, hey, look, we didn't want them to do that. We couldn't say no. We will take your refugees. We will help you. Please don't hold it against us. And they've been very accommodating. I think it's to about 250,000 Ukrainian refugees. They have brought them in, arms wide open. We have jobs, we have schools, we have business. Come be one of us, we'll save you. So you can't really hold it against them. Either way, it's becoming a point where the north flank doesn't matter. And I'll tell you why in a minute. I have another story for that. So sit tight, we'll get back to that. Let me move on. About 2 hours later, 2:53 a.m. my time. It's about 9 a.m. Just close to 9 a.m. in England. And I have this picture. It's a tweet from Boris Johnson. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he is meeting with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz Friday, today, and welcomed his principled determination to end dependence on Russian energy. How we respond to Russia's invasion will define the international order for years to come. We cannot let Putin's crimes go unpunished. There has been a very big push to ensure that Europe is no longer dependent on Russian energy. And you kind of have to scratch your head at this if you're an American. Because you have to think back to 2020, 2019, maybe even 2018. The United States, for the first time in its history, was a net exporter of energy. We didn't have to buy foreign oil or foreign natural gas. The United States was self-sufficient. So much so that it drove oil prices back down to what they were when I was a kid in the 80s. When you could actually fill your tank and buy a pack of cigarettes with a $20 bill and get change. That's how good it was. And in the last 2 years, being led by a complete moron and his administration of other morons. Well, you've been to the gas station. You've seen your natural gas bills in the last year. You see the fact that we have been groveling at the feet of the very cartel that controlled oil prices before we were energy independent. Well, Europe had no place else to get their energy, which is why they had Nord Stream 1 and they were building Nord Stream 2 because they thought they could buy it from the Russians because the Russians weren't being dicks. But now they are. So now everyone's saying you don't have to buy your energy from Russia. Well, who are they going to buy it from? Because, Captain Sundowner, creepy Uncle Joe, he shut down the Keystone. 100,000 people lost their job in the first 48 hours of the Biden administration at the stroke of a pen. They keep claiming we've got 9,000 oil drilling leases. These oil companies aren't using them. They're the price gouging. First of all, oil companies don't dictate the price at the pump. They just don't. They don't. The gas station owner does. The refineries, they dictate the price of the gasoline they sell to those gas stations. Oil companies don't have anything to do with it. You need proof? Look at what gas cost in England before this all started. It was still way more than we pay here. Way more. The day before the 2020 election, I filled my tank in my car. My car takes 93 octane. It was $17. That was for about 15 gallons. Today, it was $72 for the same amount. Back then, in England, 15 gallons, if I'm not mistaken, it was almost $8 a gallon. Back then, because they sell by the liter. But it still equated to almost $8 a gallon. Back then. Why do you think Europe has a bunch of cars that only have 1-liter engines and small displacement diesels? Because that was their answer to stifling gas prices. Anyway. We could have been energy independent. We're being led by an idiot. The only way this is going to solve itself is a case of you can't have it both ways. If you want the Green New Deal, you're going to have to unlock the restrictions of building new nuclear power plants. You're going to have to go nuclear. You're going to have to embrace the lore of pre-war history in the Fallout franchise. And then maybe, because all your power plants don't run on coal and oil and natural gas, then your cars can for a reasonable amount of money. Anyway, I'm being a bit preachy. Sorry about that. I'm by myself. Nobody's checking me for this. So let's move on. About an hour later, my time, 3:55, it's 5 minutes to 6 p.m. in Tokyo. And the story I have from Tokyo is pretty cool, because I have this comical picture to share with you, this one. And it says, Japan expels 8 of its Russian diplomats stationed in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Tokyo. Now, they were a little behind. We expelled half of Europe. Europe expelled 2 days ago. But hey, you know what? Good on you. That's the gesture. You followed along. You kicked out 8 diplomats. Great. I picked this picture as a joke, but could you imagine if that's actually how they did it? Moving on. Sorry about my sinuses. Allergies are bad today. But the show must go on. A little over an hour later, it is 5:04 my time. And it is noon in Ukraine. And I have this photo for you here. And it says Josep Borrell. He is the European Union's foreign policy chief. Tweeted Friday morning, so this is slightly post facto, that he strongly condemned the indiscriminate attack on a packed railway station in Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine, where civilians were attempting to evacuate. This is kind of the theme of the day, if you didn't know. The photo for today's war room is that train station. The attack left more than 30 civilians dead and 100 hurt. This is a early report. I have an update. This is yet another attempt to close escape routes for those fleeing this unjustified war and cause human suffering. Sure. That's what he said at noon Ukrainian time. But it's about to get a whole lot worse. Those numbers continue to add up, and that photo is about to get a whole lot worse. And if you have a sensitive stomach, well, you should probably grow up a bit. About 2 hours later, no, sorry, I got that wrong. A couple of minutes later, this came out. And this was just basically saying that the EU Council had passed a fifth round of sanctions against Europe. And this included bans on the imports of coal, and it shut down the transactions of 4 more Russian banks, and it has banned all access to Russian vessels into any ports in the EU. Kind of good. Kind of good. Kind of a little bit too late. But hey, you're making an effort, right? Let's move on. About 2 hours later, I have this photo for you. It's not specific to the story, but it was titled with it. 2:08 p.m. Ukrainian time. People worldwide have been shocked by gruesome images of corpses strewn in the streets of Bucha, Ukraine, as Russian forces pulled back in the recent days. But foreign policy experts say the brutal tactics the Kremlin is using are nothing new. It is absolutely not an accident that they are fighting this way. This came from Rebecca Koffler, and she is a former Defense Intelligence Agency officer and author of Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America. This is 100% intentional. It's not a lack of military discipline. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky detailed the alleged atrocities in a speech to the UN Security Council on Tuesday after visiting Bucha, saying that Russian forces killed entire families, adults and children, and they tried to burn the bodies to cover up the evidence. Civilians were crushed by tanks while sitting in their cars in the middle of the road, just for entertainment. They cut limbs, they slashed people's throats. Women were raped and killed in front of their children, their bodies burned post facto. Now, there are photos of this. I have a friend who volunteered. He was on a plane in 48 hours after volunteering. He has sent me photos. I've shared a few of them with you. They're pretty disturbing. The thing about cutting limbs and slashing throats and burning raped women, he sent me those too. They're not appropriate for YouTube. I will never post them. But you need to know that they're out there. They exist. These things are happening. If I could get away with sharing them on camera, I would. But I kind of like having my channel. I can't get banned for that. But it is out there. LiveLeak no longer exists. There's a website that took over after LiveLeak. I suggest you check it out. Moving on. Sorry, my sinuses are really bad, actually. So, thank you for putting up with me sniffling. A couple minutes later, this came, and this is the photo of the day, I'm sure. That is a man with his brains all over the street. along with many other people. If that makes you uncomfortable, sorry, deal with it. 2:12 Ukraine time, PM. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky decreed the Russian military as an evil that knows no bounds, following an attack on a railway station in eastern Ukraine that officials say left dozens dead. Don't worry, I haven't updated the numbers. It's just, I wrote these in the time that they came. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense said Russian forces carried out 2 missile strikes at the train station in Kramatorsk, where an evacuation of civilians was in the process of taking place. Images taken in recent days have depicted large crowds of Ukrainians standing on the station's platforms, hoping for a chance to escape Russia's bloody invasion, which has now entered its 44th day. Not having the strength and courage to confront us on the battlefield, they are cynically destroying the civilian population, Zelensky wrote on his Facebook page Friday morning. This is evil that knows no bounds, and if it is not punished, it will never stop. Now, this is the part where I would usually say, well, duh, or thank you, Captain Obvious, but I don't think that's appropriate. What he's saying, we know. It's just somebody has to keep saying it before those of us who know start saying, well, what the hell are we going to do about it? That's the problem with this. These people are being wholesale slaughtered. These are not military people. They're just people. But they're targets of another military. Anyway, now that I'm age restricted because of that photo, we'll move along anyway. Okay. So about another hour goes by. And it is now about 3 o'clock. Yeah, 3:09-ish Ukrainian time. And the photo I have for you is labeled Isolate. Here he is. This is Volodymyr Zelensky during his speech. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called on the United Nations to issue Russia ultimatums over diplomacy as the deadly war continues for a 6th straight week. Zelensky, who has garnered international praise for his refusal to bend to Moscow's aggressions, said the United Nations has offered only, quote, concern for Ukrainians since Russia's first invasion in 2014. Unfortunately, not too many of our citizens survived after raising their concerns, the President said in a Thursday interview with the Indian television Republic Media Network. This guy really gets around. You need to establish the isolation against the Russian Federation. We should not be using words of concern. We should be using the word ultimatum, Zelensky added. Because they are only using the ultimatum in their conversation with us and the rest of the world. The United Nations General Assembly voted to suspend Russia from the Human Rights Council Thursday following the revelation of war crimes over the last week. Russian negotiators agreed last week to withdraw troops from the area surrounding Kyiv and the northern city of Chernihiv to increase mutual trust. What a joke. But following the removal of troops from areas around the capital, gruesome images surfaced of more than 400 civilians being found dead in the suburb of Bucha, with bodies left abandoned on the streets or buried in mass graves. Russia has denied reports of gross human rights abuses committed by Russian troops and has accused Western nations like the U.S. of staging the atrocities that were found. Yeah, you staged that, is what they're saying. The Kremlin announced it would terminate its membership on the Human Rights Council and accused the 93 member nations that voted in favor of the suspension of blackmail. In Russia's view, the resolution is an unlawful and politically motivated act of punishment designed to make an example of a sovereign UN member pursuing independent domestic and foreign policies. This came from the Russian Foreign Ministry. Russia continues to sit as a permanent member on the UN Security Council, which gives it veto power over any major international decision. Zelensky urged the UN this week to remove Russia from the top governing body. responsible for maintaining world security and peace, over its role in what he described as the most terrible of war crimes since World War II. If we're talking about the isolation of the Russian Federation with different international organizations, then there should be isolation, Zelensky said. No more just having meetings with them, sitting with them at a single table, and talking to them on the need to settle the issue and repeating the word concern. Zelensky said he's ready to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin as soon as possible for serious peace negotiations. You know, I think you should. I think you should walk into a meeting with Putin. Putin sitting at a table 30 feet away. Zelensky walks in, walks all the way across that 30 feet to reach over and what Putin think is shake his hand, and pull out a 22 caliber pistol and put 4 rounds in the guy's forehead. War over. Anyway, let's move on. About 50 or so minutes later, the reason I keep giving you the time and how much time elapses is because I have sacrificed my phone with its ringer on to give me push notifications and sound messages on an RSS feeder of several news sources that I use to get these stories for you. So if I have to hear these noises that keep me up all fucking night, I think you can put up with the fact that I'm telling you how often I get them. That's a joke, by the way. But yeah, I do have the RSS feed. It does ping my phone constantly. And I am a bit of a light sleeper. So when I hear them, I do check them. Needless to say, my sleep schedule has been pretty screwed up for the last 44 days. Not holding it against any of you, though. Not at all. My allergies, on the other hand, suck. Anyway, let's move on. So, 8:55 8:55 a.m. my time. I'm sitting down to what I think are called coffee cakes. Never really had them before. They're not bad though. Yeah, I sat down to 3 of those while I'm drinking my morning coffee. I am congested. I have bad allergies. Not on the scale that you had, Night Strike. I know you had an upper respiratory infection or a sinus infection, so you have my sympathies because I've had those before. Anyway, Russia's suggesting Friday that. Oh, wait, I got a picture for you. I'm sorry. Let's see. I called this lapdogs. There you go. Russia is suggesting Friday that Belarus, a country it has used as a springboard for its invasion of Ukraine, should be among the nations providing security guarantees for Kyiv in the future. Russian Foreign Ministry Sergei Lapdog. Sorry, I always say that. His name is Sergei Lavrov. But he is a lapdog because he's a little bitch. Made the remark after it emerged last week that Ukraine is seeking concrete security guarantees during peace negotiations, including promises of military assistance during a future conflict from the world's leading armies in exchange for adopting neutral status. At the request of the Ukrainian side, its neutral, non-bloc, non-nuclear status should be accompanied by security guarantees, Lapdog said Friday, according to Reuters News. Lapdog is the guy on the left. He's not a very big guy, but neither's Putin. It's like 2 balding, little, angry, commie chihuahuas trying to tell the rest of the free world, don't worry, bro, we got this. Fuck out of here. Moving right along. About 20 minutes later, 4:11 Ukrainian time, PM. This is the totals. This is the numbers you were looking for. At least 50 people, including 5 children, were killed Friday in an attack by the Russian military on a train station in Kramatorsk, the area's regional governor said. Kramatorsk Mayor Alexander Goncharenko told Ukrainian TV that between 30 and 40 surgeons have been treating the wounded, and hospitals were unable to cope with the surge in admissions. The Office of Ukraine's Prosecutor General said that about 4,000 civilians were in and or around the station, most of them being women and children trying to flee from the conflict. The Ukrainian government has been urging to leave the area before an expected new offensive by Russian forces. Russian-backed separatists control part of the Donetsk region, but Kramatorsk remains under Ukrainian government control. They bombed this train station, knowing that it was full of civilians. 50 people are dead, times 6 wounded. My source that I got this story from, 50 guaranteed dead, over 300 wounded. Now in war, it's usually KIA times 3 wounded. This is KIA times 6 wounded, and they're all civilians. Just saying. Let's move on. About 2 hours later, it is now evening, 6:18 Ukrainian time. And this is one of those stories that really makes you feel good about humanity. So here's the photo. Those are pretty sexy pieces of equipment, actually. Slovakian Prime Minister Eduard Heger announced today, Friday, that his country will be sending Soviet-era S-300 air defense systems to Ukraine immediately. I can confirm that the Slovak Republic has donated to Ukraine its air defense systems, the S-300s. I believe that this defense system will help save many innocent lives from the aggression of the Putin regime. Hager made the remark while visiting Ukraine with European Union Commission President Ursula von der Leyen of the EU Foreign Policy, and EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell. He continued, however, the donation of the system does not mean that Slovakia has become part of the armed conflict. And I would like to assure all citizens of the Slovak Republic that the protection of our territory is sufficiently secure and will be reinforced in the coming days by another system from our allies. The transfer of military hardware is the first known instance of a country giving such weaponry to Ukraine since the start of the invasion on February 24th. President Joe Biden said Friday that I want to thank the Slovakian government for providing an S-300 air defense system to Ukraine, something President Zelensky has personally raised with me in our conversations. To enable this transfer and ensure continued security of Slovakia, the United States will now reposition U.S. Patriot missile systems to Slovakia. Now is not the time for complacency, he added. The Russian military may have failed in its objective of capturing Kyiv, but it continues to inflict horrific acts of brutality on the Ukrainian people. This is the theme of this conflict, and you have heard me say this for weeks. Backfill. Any nation helping Ukraine, sending aid with systems that the Ukrainians are familiar with and can use, for instance, Polish MiG-29s, or in this case, Slovakian S-300 missile systems, or German troops moving to Slovakia, have been backfilled by the United States. There's a reason we have 180,000 troops in Eastern Europe right now. We have backfilled. When Slovakia sends S-300s, we give them Patriots. If Poland sends MiG-29s, we will sell them F-16s. These are the standard weapons of war for NATO allies. In a way, it's sort of brilliant. We have gotten these countries to give their weapon systems to Ukraine and then buy the NATO replacements from us. As a capitalist venture, it's brilliant. Anyway, that's all I got for that. Moving right along, about an hour later, again, it is dusk. It is 7:22 Ukrainian time, and I have this photo for you. Ukrainian President Zelensky did an interview with CBS News 60 Minutes and said that he only saw death, just death, when touring the city of Bucha earlier in the week. In the interview, which is set to air Sunday, so you're getting a spoiler here, Zelensky said Ukraine is defending the ability of a person to live in the Western world in their fight against Russia. They say we're defending Western values. I always say, what are Western values? Someone who lives in the United States or Europe, do they also not like children? Zelensky said. Do they not want their children to go to university? Do they not want their grandfather to live for 100 years? He continued. We have the same values. We are defending the right to live. I never thought this right was so costly. These are human values. So that Russia doesn't choose what we should do and how I'm using my rights. That right was given to me by God and my parents. The Ukraine-Russia conflict is now in its 44th day. Now, you gotta remember, he is a religious person. I am not. So, when I read that, I can't put the weight of what he's saying behind it. But I understand it, and I can definitely empathize with it. I've never been the kind of person to try to take someone's religion away from them. If that's what you need to make it through life and the day, if that's what gives you comfort, more power to you. Like, everybody has their thing, the thing that they need to keep going. I'm never going to take that away from somebody, even if I don't believe it. So, for him to be able to say these things, I applaud him. Seriously, I respect him for that. It's just, I can't relate to it. Not in the context he's using, but I can definitely empathize for it. This guy really, really cares about his country. He cares about his people. That's all I need. That's all I need to be convinced. That's good enough for me. Should be good enough for you too. Let's move on. Oh, I think no, I didn't take him. Never mind. All right, so around the same time, I'm going to take you back across the pond, and it's 1:23 p.m. Eastern Time, New York. And this came from the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. And he said Friday that the reported Russian attack on the train station in Kramatorsk, which has left over 50 dead, is a gross violation of international humanitarian law. The strike on Kramatorsk railway station in eastern Ukraine today, which killed and injured scores of civilians waiting to be evacuated, including many women, children, and elderly, and other attacks against civilians and on civilian infrastructure are completely unacceptable. This came from Stefani Dujarric. They are gross violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law, for which the perpetrators must be held accountable. The Secretary General reiterates his appeal to all concerned to bring an immediate end to this brutal war. Word salad is what that is. We know all of this. Why do you have to state the obvious? Oh, that's right, because that's what you do. Anyway. At the same time, back across the pond again, I'm going to show you this guy again, because I think he's a genius, and he's brilliant, and I admire him, and I respect him. 6:23 p.m. London. That's right, Downing Street. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson pledged another 130 million in high-grade military equipment to Ukraine, including Starstreak anti-aircraft missiles. That's British version of AA. Another 800 anti-tank missiles and precision munitions capable of lingering in the sky until directed to their target. otherwise known as UAVs. Speaking Friday at a news conference with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Johnson also promised more helmets. Oh, here's some helmets. Night vision and body armor. Cool. The items were in addition to some 200,000 pieces of non lethal military equipment from the UK that had already been promised. The pledge of new weaponry came as Johnson condemned the attack on the train station in the eastern Ukrainian city of Kramatorsk earlier in the day. Johnson said both the UK and Germany shared the revulsion at the brutality being unleashed, including the unconscionable bombing of refugees fleeing their homes, adding that the train station attack shows the depths to which Putin's vaunted army has sunk. He sure does have his way with the words. He is a master of the English language. Basically, he's saying, Russia, you suck. Moving right along. We're almost done, actually, so don't worry. I'm not going to keep you too much later. About a little over 2 hours later. All right, now it's here. Have some helmets and night vision. Exactly. You know, you could have been on the panel, just saying, but I'm almost done, so it's okay. I understand you probably sound worse than I do. Hope you get better soon so we can do this together again, okay? All right. Sorry. I was putting stuff up my nose. Not cocaine. 2 hours later, it is dusk. It is actually nighttime. 8:25 p.m. Ukrainian time. And this one's pretty serious, actually. Here's the photo. Russian forces destroyed decades of data kept at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant after forces had occupied the area for 35 days. This is all that remains of our Chernobyl documents and archives, what we have been collecting for decades. Now, I'm quoting this. Where'd it go? Some whore just threw them in the trash. Alexander Sryota, chairman of the Public Council under the State Agency of Ukraine for the Exclusion Zone Management. Representatives from the State Agency of Ukraine, representatives of the state agency posted pictures of trash bins allegedly full of documents along with images that showed missing servers that monitored radiation levels in the area. The United Nations nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, said Russian forces, which had occupied Chernobyl since the first day of the invasion, vacated the area. Russian troops left Chernobyl last week after Russian negotiators said troops would withdraw from areas around the capital city of Kyiv and the northern city of Chernihiv, roughly 55 miles from Chernobyl. Ukraine told the IAEA Thursday that it had begun the process of resuming regulatory control over the NPP nuclear power plant. The IAEA says it intends to visit the site of the 1986 nuclear disaster as soon as it is possible to assess the radiation situation. Ukrainian officials have been warning for weeks that unprotected Russian forces were kicking up clouds of radioactive dust by driving armored vehicles through an area known as the Red Forest. And recent drone footage reportedly showed that trenches had been dug in contaminated areas all throughout the exclusion zone. The nuclear watchdog said it has been unable to independently verify reporting that it suggested Russian forces have received high doses of radiation. It is of paramount importance that the IAEA travels to Chernobyl so that we can take urgent action to assist Ukraine in ensuring nuclear safety and security there. Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi was quoted saying, I'm in close consultations with our Ukrainian counterparts to organize such a visit as soon as it is possible. Yeah. Kick up the dirt, dig up the trenches, come back with 3 eyes and 4 arms and 9 toes on your left hand. Anyway, I believe Was that the story of the day? I forgot if I wrote that down. Sorry. Huh. I swear I wrote one that said story of the day. Where was it? Oh well. That might have been the story of the day. No, this is. This is the story of the day, which coincidentally is the last story I have for you today. And yes, I did sort of put a joke in. I see you in there, Mike, but the thing is I'm almost done. So let me just go ahead and put this last one out there. I'll have you on tomorrow, though, for sure. Here's the picture. I saw that, and I was like, I need that in my life. I mean, I already have 8 dogs, but what's one more, right? I called this picture the best boy. Look at that dog. 10:27 p.m. Moscow. Russia is ramping up its war effort in eastern Ukraine, and a senior U.S. defense official told reporters Friday that Moscow could look to recruit as many as 60,000 additional soldiers to join the fight. The official said that the Pentagon has seen indications that Russia is looking to launch a mobilization phase as it refits soldiers in Russia and Belarus. The U.S. and NATO have warned this is not a withdrawal, but a tactic to allow Russia to resupply its depleted troops and focus a major offensive in the eastern Donbass region. But the senior U.S. defense officials have also noted that there have not been any indications that there are fresh reinforcements. The official said that U.S. is not seeing strong evidence that the soldiers could be recruited to replenish the Russian troops and will be fully trained, fully armed, or even fully ready to enter the war. It is unclear how many Russian troops have been killed since the onslaught of the war more than 6 weeks ago, but Russian spokesman Dmitry Peskov said in an interview Thursday that Moscow has seen significant losses to its troops. Peskov did not provide a figure on the number of Russian casualties, but the Kremlin put the number close to 1,350 deaths since late March. Pay attention to the scroller, pay attention to the scroller on the bottom of the screen. Peskov did not provide a figure on the Russian. Oh, sorry. A NATO official said that the figure was more likely closer to 15,000 deaths. Ukrainian armed forces said this week that Russian troop casualties were actually more than 19,000 and times 3 wounded, though these figures have not been independently verified. Despite apparent heavy losses over a matter of weeks, the senior U.S. official said Russia is believed to have maintained 80 to 85% of its fighting force from the start of the war. We believe that they have not solved all of their logistics and sustainment problems, however, noting that these logistic problems exist both within and beyond Ukraine's borders. So our sense is that they will likely not be able to reinforce the eastern part of the country with any great speed. But the senior defense official also noted that U.S. authorities expect the Russian offensive in eastern Ukraine to be a brutal fight. This will be a knife fight. This could be a very bloody and very ugly conflict, the official warned. The Russians are limiting their geographic aims, and they still have a lot of combat power left available to them. U.S. and NATO security officials have also warned that the war in Ukraine could go on for months, if not years, to come. Well, duh, because you're not helping. That's the fact of the matter. This could have been wrapped up in 21 days. So, I'm going to dream out loud here. You had a conflict where the original aim was to crush the capital and bring the nation to heel. You had a 40-mile long convoy. Reinforcements, soldiers, beans, bullets, and bandages. Right? And you broke down. And you were stuck there for 14 days straight. Not moving. A perfectly beautiful, vulnerable column And if it weren't for our lack of resolve, a single flight of A-10 Warthogs could have laid waste to it. Now, there have been pundits and generals and Air Force commanders on both sides of this saying it was either, yeah, we could have done it, or it's not as easy as you think. But if I'm not mistaken, the A-10 Thunderbolt II, which most of us know as the Warthog, had a fucking field day during the Bosnian, Herzegovin, Serbian conflict. It was made for that shit. We saw what it did at the Highway of Death in Iraq. Don't tell me this wouldn't have worked. That thing is a flying tank. We looked at the Aleutian Il-2 from World War II and went, that. We need that. Do that, but do it better. And we did. Fairchild did it better. Fairchild, right? Yeah, I think that's what it's called. We did it better. And we didn't do it. We didn't use it. We didn't even lend it to them. But you know what we did do? We reenacted the Lend-Lease Act of 1941. I think 2 days ago. So maybe we will. Maybe we will do this by proxy. Because remember, we haven't been training them. But then all of a sudden we have been training them. We haven't been sharing intel with them. But suddenly we've been sharing all of our intel with them, according to Lloyd Austin, SecDef. What else are we not doing that we're actually doing? You see, I don't think we're acting fast enough, but then again, maybe we're just not on the record doing it. Because you gotta hand it to them. Ukrainians are really putting boots to ass. Nobody expected this. But then again, the United States never anticipated Russia losing. And at the same time, we never anticipated Ukraine winning. And I'm going to fall back on this one last time. But this war is only half over when Russia gets pushed out of Ukraine. Somebody still has to go in there and get that sawed-off little bald-headed fascist asshole out of Moscow and put him on the end of a rope and put Russia to bed in history once and for all. I'm not saying that you're going to destroy Russia. Don't get me wrong, make no mistake. Destroying Russia as a fascist, communist, dictatorial world military superpower can end when Putin dies. That's all I'm saying. You can bring them down to civility once and for all if you just get that little shit out of there. So, that being said, that is all I have for you tonight. And I'm going to play this for you. And I'm going to thank you for taking the time to listen to just me, which did make this flow much simpler, but I do prefer to have panelists. And Nightstrike was sitting in the green room, and I do appreciate him making the effort, but he did show up a bit late, and I was almost finished. So anyway, if you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a regular here, welcome back. Either way, check out my other playlist and see if my other interests might be of interest to you. I can give you an update saying that Sunday's firearms review video is done, and I will upload it Saturday night for you to watch Sunday morning. So anyway, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch. Maybe hit like, maybe share, maybe subscribe, maybe tell others I do this. This was the War Room. This was day 44. Slava Ukraini, and we'll see you tomorrow.